Hello, hello. Welcome. It's getting close to that time. Close to that time, but not quite, because it is now story time. And we find ourselves at chapter 15 of Fuzzy. Now, where we left off, right. Oh, yes. Big things are happening. Okay, so where we left off, the very last thing that happened was that Ryder had said that they were going to erase Fuzzy's memories, and Christy, who was listening, told Fuzzy, emergency, emergency, they're going to wipe your memory. But Fuzzy wasn't answering. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so chapter 15.1, room 43. Fuzzy was outside room 43. There was no sign of the door of room 43, and since no one ever went in or out, most students weren't even aware that it was there. But after downloading and analyzing the school building's schematics, Fuzzy was certain this was Barbara's room, the place where all of her hard drives, routers, power cells, and processors lived. Fuzzy pressed the door release button. Nothing. It was locked. He considered whether he had the strength to force the door open. Yes, he concluded. He did. A screen flickered on nearby. Barbara's white-haired, phony, smiling countenance appeared on the nearest wall screen. F. Robot, you have been told to return to your lab. Fuzzy did some calculation. Obey Barbara? 2. Help Max? 128. 128 is greater than 2. Instead of obeying, Fuzzy turned to the screen and spoke. Barbara, have you ever heard of fuzzy logic? Barbara was not to be distracted. F. Robot, you have been told to return to your lab. Fuzzy logic means that sometimes 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2. F. Robot, you have been told to return to your lab. It means we can be more than just our programming. F. Robot, you have been told to return to your lab. It means that some rules can be broken. Some orders can be ignored. With a sudden rush of power to his servos, he yanked the door open. The sound of rending metal made a terrible screech. Barbara sent a burst of power to the door, slamming it shut again, but not before Fuzzy had slipped inside. She added a long string of discipline tags to Fuzzy's account. He was now clearly a high priority threat to test performance, student discipline, and even school property. She locked the door. Yes, F. Robot, replied Barbara in her calm and clear voice. As a matter of fact, I do know a thing or two about fuzzy logic and breaking rules. A metal arm struck him in the back of the head. Riot shields swung out from the walls and began to close in on him. Several more arms emerged, grasping for Fuzzy's arms and legs with titanium grips, designed to restrain even the most violent student. But Fuzzy was no longer a student. He was a military machine, built for duty in the most punishing environments and trained to deal with anything that got in the way of his mission. And right now his mission was help Max, 128. He grabbed one of the arms and ripped it from its socket. He swung it hard, bashing away another arm, then jammed it between two of the riot shields, preventing them from completely closing him in. He tried to force himself through the gap. He increased the power of every motor in his body to 100%, and he could see the racks of computers and hard drives that were Barbara, if he could just get to them. Another arm popped from the wall, this one tipped with a crackling bolt of electricity. It was a taser, meant to be used only if a student's behavior was criminal or life-threatening. It could also fry a robot's brain. Deep within their digital brains, both computer and robot were now running the same subroutine, survival mode. Chapter 15.2, Detention Room 2. The door opened. Max was glad. She couldn't stand waiting any longer. Miss Brockmeyer was on the other side of the door. Maxine, what happened? I thought you were going to try to do better for me. Max sighed. This was going to be rough. A load of hooey from Brockmire and then an endless amount of fuss from her parents. Apparently, her thoughts were reflected by her silence. Well, that attitude isn't going to help, said Brockmire. Let's go in and find out how serious that evidence is. Max shook off the arm Brockmire tried to put around her shoulders. She stepped through the door into a room with a few plastic chairs and a big wall screen. Principal Dorcas was there, and so were her parents. She wanted to run to them and let them hold her and protect her, but they both started shouting at her right away. Finally, Dorcas cleared his throat and suggested that they all sit down. Vice Principal Barbara, we're ready to see your evidence. The huge screen flicked on. Max flinched in fear and disgust and hate as Barbara's big face appeared. She didn't want to see all of her evidence again, especially not with her parents watching. And she didn't have to. Mr. and Mrs. Zalaster, thank you for coming in today to talk about Max. That's odd, thought Max. Barbara had never called her Max. It was always M. Zalaster. Barbara's voice continued. Max is a model student. We are happy to have her at this school. We regret that a computer error caused you to receive incorrect reports about Max. All erroneous conduct points and infractions have been erased from her records. I'm printing out a revised list of her corrected test scores, citizenship rating, and her overall constant upgrade score. As you can see, she has a bright future. Her parents looked at each other in surprise. Brockmire actually looked a little disappointed. Dorcas started tapping at his own screen for answers, and Max was totally blown away. She knew Barbara would never call her Max, would never admit to erroneous points, and would never, ever say she had a bright future. Only Fuzzy would say something like that. Could he have taken control of Barbara? Barbara's voice spoke one more time. Max, please report to room 43. Immediately. The room's windowless security door whooshed open. It's okay to run. Fuzzy needs your help. Really badly. Room 43, he's... Then the screen did something funny. Barbara stopped talking and seemed to look around the room blankly for a minute. Then the screen went dark. Max was sure Fuzzy was behind this, and she was just as sure that he was in big trouble. I've got to go, she said to the baffled adults. But suddenly the screen was back on again. Barbara was also back, and talking very fast. Student M. Zalaster has 687 discipline tags. Student M. Zalaster plotted to cheat on today's science test. Student M. Zalaster is not upgrading. Student M. Zalaster is downgrading. Student M. Zalaster must be expelled. Student M. Zalaster... But Student M. Zalaster had already bolted out the door. Chapter 15.3, Room 43. Fuzzy had scored an early victory when he dodged Barbara's taser-tipped arm and then shoved it into one of her own processors. The lights flickered, sparks flew, wires melted, and all the screens went blank. Fuzzy thought Barbara was beaten. Then he saw a monitor turn itself back on. In tiny type at the bottom of the screen, it said Barbara 5.6, rebooting. She wasn't beaten, but it would give him a moment to help Max before she could come back online. He analyzed the room full of equipment in front of him. Instead of being stuffed into a robot body, like his own processors and systems, Barbara's brains were carefully installed on a series of racks and shelves with miles of cables connecting all the boxes. He made an educated guess at which box would be the most useful and yanked out a fistful of cables. Then he flicked open his fingertips and plugged himself in. Fuzzy found himself in a sea of computer code, student records, and building controls. A human could have scrolled through it for years without getting anywhere, but it all made sense to Fuzzy. In milliseconds, he was in control of Barbara's communication. Now he could see through every camera in the school at once. He instantly analyzed the faces around Max, looking pale and frightened, in Dorcas' office. He heard Dorcas saying, Vice Principal Barbara, we're ready to hear your evidence. Yes! He had gotten through just in time. He turned on the screen hanging over Dorget's desk, and then fired up Barbara's avatar and voice subroutines. "Mr. and Mrs. Zelaster, thank you for coming in today to talk about Max," he began, and then he told the assembled listeners that Max was a model student and that the infractions on her record had been in error. Meanwhile, another part of his lightning-fast brain was actually finding Max's records. He updated her test scores and completely removed her from the discipline tag database. Then he sent the new data to a printer in room Office RM7. "As you can see," he went on, "she has a bright future." Something struck him from behind so powerfully that his main hard drive crashed. And then came the shock, a megawatt-strong power surge that ripped through his wiring, burning out servos and glitching out microchips. Barbara was back online. Chapter 15.4, Room 43. Fuzzy had made a mistake, a big mistake. If only he had attacked Barbara's robotic systems first instead of helping Max. He had assigned help Max an even higher priority than self-preservation, and now he had paid the price for it. But now that he had completed help Max 128, self-preservation 127 kicked in. He switched to his backup hard drive and diverted all processing power to survival mode. "Max, please report to room 43 immediately," he said hurriedly. "It's okay to run. Fuzzy needs your help really badly. He's..." Barbara blocked him from the communication modules digitally and then set about disconnecting him physically too. Powerful claws clamped down on him and began dragging him away from Barbara's processors. He struggled to stay connected, but three of her tentacle-like arms began pulling on him from different directions. First, he felt his connection to Barbara's computer sever. Then he got an error message. Left arm disconnected. No pain accompanied the industry. No pain accompanied the injury, but it reduced Fuzzy's defensive capability and left him slightly unbalanced. He was just barely able to dodge as Barbara flung his own arm at him. He decided to focus on defeating Barbara's tentacles one at a time. Chopping at one with his right hand, he was able to rip it loose from the wall. Unfortunately, Barbara seemed to have an unlimited number of these Hydra-like arms, and now he had only one. But he still had two powerful mechanized legs. Fuzzy fought his way to the center of the room, trying for a position to avoid the arms coming at him in all directions. He had to spin in a fast circle to accomplish this, kicking and flailing to keep the arms from grabbing hold of him. He was keeping Barbara at bay, but barely. She had her own power supply with backup generators just in case. He was surviving only on battery power, which was dwindling fast as he overclocked and overpowered every motor in his body just to survive. He reconnected to Jones's computer. "Help me," he begged. I think we'll do the last batch all in one go. I think we'll stop right there. So there's about 25, 30 pages left. We'll do those all next week, all on Tuesday. Then, take a little break, and I have a new book coming in the mail. We'll find out what that is then. But until then, we will wait to find out what happens to Fuzzy. In the meantime, you know as well as I do, it's late, and I'm tired, and so it's time to get some sleep. Good night.